On a quiet summer afternoon in 2000, an 8-year-old girl named Sarah Payne vanished while playing near her grandparents' home. What unfolded was a story of heartbreak, a relentless pursuit of justice, and a family's fight to protect others from similar tragedies. This is the case of Sarah Payne, a case that changed the nation.
It was a warm summer day on July 1, 2000, in the tranquil village of Kingston Gorse, West Sussex, England. 8-year-old Sarah Payne was playing with her siblings in a cornfield near their grandparents' house. Their laughter echoed across the idyllic countryside, a picture-perfect scene of childhood innocence. Around 3:30 p.m., Sarah briefly left the group to return to the house but never arrived. Panic quickly set in when her parents, Michael and Sarah Payne, discovered she was missing. By 5 p.m., the family contacted the Sussex police, sparking an immediate and wide-scale search. Volunteers from the local community joined officers to comb through fields, woodland, and nearby villages. Helicopters circled the area while divers scoured nearby ponds. The search continued late into the night, with Sarah's family pleading for her safe return. Police focused on reconstructing Sarah's movements. Witnesses reported seeing a white van near the area around the time she disappeared. This lead would become crucial in the unfolding investigation. 2 days later, on July 3rd, police held a press conference where Sarah's parents made a tearful plea to the public. The disappearance quickly garnered national attention. News outlets broadcast Sarah's photo across the country, while authorities received hundreds of tips from concerned citizens. The breakthrough came when forensic officers located a single child's shoe near a road miles from where Sarah had last been seen. Tests confirmed it belonged to Sarah. The discovery confirmed suspicions that Sarah had been abducted, and the investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a potential murder. Sussex police widened their net, interviewing known offenders in the area. One name stood out: Roy Whiting. A 41-year-old with a history of sexual offenses against children, Whiting was living in a caravan near the location of Sarah's disappearance. His white Ford van matched witness descriptions. On July 10th, Whiting was arrested on suspicion of abduction. However, without direct evidence linking him to Sarah's disappearance, police had no choice but to release him. Frustration mounted among investigators as they continued their search for solid leads. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of Whiting's van provided a chilling clue. Fibers from Sarah's shoe were found in the vehicle. Additional evidence came from a public tipster who recalled seeing Whiting cleaning his van frantically the day after Sarah vanished. Investigators intensified their surveillance of Whiting. The discovery of Sarah's body on July 17th in a field near Pulborough, 15 miles from where she disappeared, shattered any remaining hopes. Her body was partially buried, and the location indicated that Whiting had chosen an isolated spot to conceal his crime. The community was devastated. The forensic link between Sarah's shoe and Whiting's van, coupled with eyewitness accounts, finally gave police the evidence they needed. A detailed timeline of Whiting's movements placed him near Kingston Gorse at the time of Sarah's disappearance. Authorities now had a clear suspect. The trial of Roy Whiting began on November 12, 2001, at Lewes Crown Court, capturing national attention. Prosecutors presented a damning case, meticulously outlining the evidence against Whiting. His criminal history loomed large in the proceedings. He had served time for the abduction and assault of another young girl in 1995, eerily similar to Sarah's case. The timeline pieced together by investigators painted a horrifying picture. Whiting had been driving aimlessly through the area, likely seeking a victim, when he spotted Sarah. Prosecutors argued that he used his familiarity with rural West Sussex to evade detection after abducting her. A critical moment came when forensic experts testified about the fibers found in Whiting's van, which were a perfect match to Sarah's clothing and shoe. Hair strands belonging to Sarah were also discovered in the vehicle. These findings firmly linked Whiting to the crime scene. Defense attorneys attempted to cast doubt on the evidence, arguing that the fibers could have been transferred unintentionally. They also questioned the reliability of witness testimonies. However, Whiting's previous conviction made it nearly impossible to distance him from suspicion in the minds of the jury. Throughout the trial, Sarah's family sat stoically in the courtroom, enduring every harrowing detail. Their presence became a symbol of resilience and the need for justice. Public support for the Payne family surged, with vigils and memorials held across the country. Whiting's erratic behavior during the trial further solidified his guilt in the public eye. At one point, he lashed out at prosecutors, denying all allegations in a fit of rage. His lack of remorse was evident and contributed to the perception that he was a dangerous predator. The jury deliberated for a mere 4 hours before delivering their verdict on December 12, 2001. Roy Whiting was found guilty of the abduction and murder of Sarah Payne. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, describing him as an evil and depraved individual. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Sarah's family, though the pain of their loss was immeasurable. Her parents became vocal advocates for child protection laws, campaigning for a national sex offender registry. Their efforts led to the implementation of Sarah's law, giving parents the right to know if someone with access to their child has a record of sexual offenses. In prison, Whiting remained unrepentant, often clashing with other inmates. His case became a cautionary tale about the importance of vigilance and community action. Despite the tragedy, Sarah's legacy lived on through the changes her family championed. The murder of Sarah Payne left a permanent scar on the community of Kingston Gorse and the nation as a whole. Her story remains a heartbreaking reminder of the dangers that lurk even in the most serene settings. Through their advocacy, her family ensured that her memory would be a force for good, protecting countless other children from harm.
Picture this like a perfect English summer day, out in the countryside, kids are running around, the sun's out, you can smell that fresh cut grass.
Idyllic, yeah.
Yeah, totally. But now, imagine that peaceful scene just gets completely shattered.
Yeah.
And it turns into like every parent's worst nightmare.
Their child disappears.
Exactly. Vanishes without a trace. And that's what we're diving into today. It's the really tragic case of 8-year-old Sarah Payne.
Yeah, this case, it really gripped the entire UK, and not just because of, how horrible it was, but also because of how it changed child protection laws forever, really.
Right. And we're going to look at all of it, the events, the whole investigation, and the legacy of this case. And we're using all those sources you sent us.
A whole stack of them, yeah.
And one thing that's crazy is just how normal that day started for Sarah and her family. They were visiting her grandparents.
In Kingston Gorse.
Right? Kingston Gorse. It seemed like such a peaceful village. It was July 1st, 2000. And Sarah, She was playing with her brother and sister in a cornfield near their grandparents' house. And then in just a second, she was gone.
Just like that.
Yeah?
It was around 3:30 in the afternoon when she vanished. Her brother, he actually saw her briefly walking toward a road, kind of at the edge of the field.
Oh, wow.
But then nothing. She was just gone.
It's terrifying.
The response was huge, though, immediate. Hundreds of volunteers, police, with dogs, helicopters, everyone searching. It was frantic, everyone hoping they'd find her safe.
And in the middle of all that, there were these reports of a white van, right?
Yeah, seen around the area when Sarah disappeared.
And people described it. That detail, it became so important. It's wild how something like a white van can be so central to an investigation.
It became the symbol almost of fear and uncertainty, this van just lurking around. And the police, of course, they were immediately focused on anyone matching those descriptions, anyone with a white van. And that's how Roy Whiting came up. He had a previous conviction, actually, abducting and indecently assaulting a young girl.
Oh, wow.
And he was living in a caravan pretty near to where they think Sarah was taken.
That's got to be a huge red flag for investigators, right? I mean, someone with that past, so close to where Sarah disappeared.
Oh, absolutely. Huge. But, having a suspect and proving it, those are two different things. They needed solid evidence to actually connect him to Sarah. And that evidence, well, it kind of came in a small package at first.
What do you mean?
Sarah's shoe.
Oh, wow.
They found it miles from that cornfield. So she hadn't just wandered off.
So the shoe not only expanded the search, but it also had to confirm everyone's fears, right? That she was taken?
Exactly. And then came the real breakthrough, forensics. They found fibers on her shoe that matched fibers from the carpet in Whiting's van.
Whoa.
That connection, all that careful lab work, that became the core of the case against him.
The fiber analysis, that seems like it was everything. What kind of fibers were they, and how did they even know to look for that?
Well, the fibers were a specific mix used in a certain type of carpeting. And the scientists, they could match them to Whiting's van, without a doubt. This kind of analysis, it was getting really big in investigations back then. And in this case, it provided the missing link between Sarah and Whiting.
So they have the shoe, the fiber match, and this white van. What's next?
A tip. Someone comes forward, tells the police they saw Whiting, really cleaning his van the day after Sarah vanished.
Yeah. Talk about incriminating. That's got to be a sign that something's wrong, right?
Definitely.
But did they find Sarah?
Sadly, yes. On July 17th, 2000, in a field miles from where she was taken, it officially changed the investigation from missing person to murder.
That's heartbreaking for everyone, especially her family.
Absolutely.
Oh.
But finding her body, that's what let the police start figuring out Whiting's movements. Corroborating those witness statements and analyzing every single piece of evidence from that van.
So they were building their case, piece by piece,
Yeah.
to show a jury.
Exactly. And with each piece, each statement, it was getting harder and harder for Whiting.
It's November 2001. The trial, it finally begins for Roy Whiting.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole country's watching, waiting to see if justice, will actually be served. I can't even imagine the pressure on the prosecution.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just about a guilty verdict. It was about making people feel safe again, showing that even after something this awful, the system works. They had to be so careful, present a case that was airtight, no room for doubt, and they did.
So take us inside that courtroom. What were the biggest pieces of evidence, and how did the defense even try to fight back?
Well, they focused on a few key things. First, that forensic evidence we talked about, the fibers from Sarah's shoe, matching the carpet in Whiting's van. Really hard to explain that away.
Yeah, it connected him right to her. What about those witnesses, the ones who saw the van?
Yeah.
Did their stories hold up?
They did. Several people put Whiting's van near where Sarah disappeared around the right time. The defense tried to poke holes in their memories, said they could be confused, maybe saw a different van, but overall, those testimonies, they mattered.
And then there was that tip about Whiting cleaning his van, right?
Yeah.
That had to play a big part.
It did. Prosecution said it showed guilt, like he was hiding something. Defense said, well, he cleaned his van a lot anyway, but the timing. Right after Sarah's gone missing. Super suspicious.
So we have the forensics, the witnesses, this suspicious behavior, but Whiting said he didn't do it. What was his defense? What were they going for?
A few things. They said the witnesses might not be remembering right. Memories can be tricky. Said maybe those van sightings weren't even Whiting. And the fibers. Maybe they got there some other way accidentally.
Seems like a stretch with those specific fibers and them being from his van's carpet.
It was. They had a tough job from the beginning. The evidence was strong. And the prosecution, well, they had another ace up their sleeve. Whiting's past.
Right, that other conviction. The abduction and assault. How did that affect things?
It was a big problem for the defense. The prosecution said it was a pattern. Showed he was capable of doing this, of hurting another girl.
So even if the jury wasn't sure about some of the evidence, his past just made him look bad, like he could do it.
Exactly, like a shadow hanging over everything. It made people uneasy.
Scary to think about. But what about Whiting himself? How did he act during all this?
Volatile. He got angry, denied everything. But the worst part, he showed no remorse. It just solidified that image people had of him. Cold, calculating.
So even his own actions were hurting him.
Totally. Almost like he was helping the prosecution. By playing into that image, the one of a man who could commit this horrible crime.
And through it all, Sarah's family is there, in the courtroom, having to relive it all.
And their presence, it was powerful. A reminder of what this crime really meant, the real cost. It kept the focus where it belonged, on Sarah, on getting justice for her.
Weeks of testimony, waiting, and then the jury makes a decision.
They only took 4 hours. Guilty. Abduction and murder. You could feel the relief in the room. Justice, finally.
That moment for her family, it must have been, I can't even imagine. But at least they got that answer, that the man who did this was going to be held responsible.
Yeah. And the judge, he didn't hold back when he gave Whiting life in prison. Called him evil and depraved. He'll likely never see the outside of a prison again.
So Whiting's convicted, sentenced, case closed. But we said earlier this case changed things. So what happened after the verdict?
Well, Sarah's parents, Michael and Sarah, they took their grief, their anger, and they did something incredible with it.
What do you mean?
They fought for change. So no other family would have to go through what they did.
Wow. To find that strength after something like that, that's amazing. What exactly did they do?
They pushed for what's now known as Sarah's Law. It gives parents in the UK the right to know if someone who has access to their child has a history of sex offenses.
That's huge, giving parents that knowledge so they can keep their kids safe. Was there pushback against that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Some people worried about privacy and that it could lead to, people taking the law into their own hands. But the Paynes, they were firm. They said parents have a right to know if someone dangerous is near their kids.
It's such a complicated issue, protecting children, but also individual rights. How does Sarah's Law even work?
It rolled out in phases. Started with some trial runs in 2008, then went nationwide in 2011. Parents, guardians, anyone taking care of a kid, they can officially ask the police about someone if they're worried about their past.
So it's not like anyone could just look up anyone else. It's controlled.
Right. You got to have a real reason, go through the right process. The police check it out before they give any information.
Makes sense. So Sarah's Law came directly from the Paynes' work.
It's amazing what they were able to do to honor their daughter, but did it make a difference? Like, are kids safer because of it?
That's what researchers are trying to figure out. It's hard to say for sure if Sarah's Law alone stopped any crimes, but it definitely made people more aware, and parents can be more proactive now, like an extra layer of protection.
Exactly. Not a perfect solution, but a big step towards keeping kids safe.
It's amazing, really, how they took, this horrible thing and turned it into something positive. But it also kind of brought up this debate that, it's still going on.
About sex offender registries, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sarah's Law lets parents know if someone around their kid has a record. But it also makes you think about, people's rights, privacy, and if these registries even really work.
It's tough. Strong arguments on both sides.
For sure.
People who support them, like the Paynes, they say they're crucial. To keep track of offenders, stop them from doing it again, makes things transparent, communities can protect themselves.
But there are those downsides too, right?
Oh, yeah. Critics say it makes it hard for people who did their time to, get back to normal life, like a label that sticks with them forever.
And doesn't it also give people maybe a false sense of security? Not every offender's on there. And just having the list doesn't stop crimes from happening.
That's true. We got to remember, registries are just one part of keeping kids safe. Education, awareness, communities supporting each other, and the police doing their job, those are all vital too.
This case really makes you think, how do we keep kids safe, but also respect people's rights? How do we stop these awful things from happening in the first place?
Big questions. And there's no easy answers. But what we do know is that the conversation about protecting kids, it needs to keep going. And what happened to Sarah, it's still shaping that conversation.
We've gone over a lot today, from the The details of her abduction and murder, to what her parents did to make Sarah's law happen, and how it started this national discussion about child protection. What sticks out to you most from all of this?
I think it's how resilient people can be. Even after something unimaginable, Sarah's parents, they could have just been consumed by grief. But they chose to do something good with it, something that could prevent other families from going through the same thing.
And their work had a huge impact nationwide.
Absolutely. This case, it's a dark reminder of, well, the bad in the world. But it also shows how much love and courage people have, that drive for justice.
And it gives us a lot to consider, right? What can we each do to make the world safer for kids? How can we help victims and families? Things to think about long after we're done here.
Couldn't agree more. It's a tragic story, but it also shows that even from something so awful, positive change can happen.